Hey everybody, it's Harry from Celebrity Daddy BBQ, the YouTube channel that teaches you how to master barbecue so you can spread barbecue love. I'm doing a viewer request today. You guys asked me, hey Harry, can you do a buttermilk brine brisket? Because you've done that on pork, you've done it on ribs. So the answer is yes. So in this episode, I'll show you guys how to do a very simple, super delicious buttermilk and salt brine brisket. This is a aged prime brisket. I've aged it for about 20 days. So we're going to show you guys how we trim off this brisket. Let it soak overnight using a two-stage brine process. The first stage is going to be a dry salt brine for about 30 to 40 minutes, followed by a overnight buttermilk brine. We're going to cook this brisket up to perfection. Show you guys the end result of this salt buttermilk brine brisket episode. I need to show you some issue with this brisket here. So this brisket has a really thin piece here, and if I cook this thin piece perfectly, this is going to be undercooked. So we're going to do a little block trim on the brisket. I'm going to save the thin parts. We're going to do a beef stew. I'll do some beef brisket curry with it later, but I'm just going to show you guys how to do a block trim. You can also use the block trim method to start kind of get meat to make your sausage. So I'm going to feel it right here. This is really thin. So we're going to kind of trim it off here. Save these pieces, which are still very good eating. Call it rectangular block trim method. So these pieces will go into another. I'm going to cook and get rid of some of the point muscle here. That's good enough. We're going to soak this piece here now. Show you guys a two-stage dry method using salt to get the salt ions to penetrate the meat before we soak in the buttermilk brine with also some salt in it, carefully calibrated, so that after overnight the flavor would have soaked into the brisket, and then the sugars and the acid within the buttermilk would have tenderized and given the brisket additional flavor. The first phase of the buttermilk brisket process is to apply a dry brine of some salt. We want the salt ions to penetrate the brisket. So I'm going to sprinkle on a very light coating of salt to begin the process here. And you can see close up, I'm not using a lot of salt, and I'm just using regular table salt to kind of get some salt into the meat so that the salt ions, NaCl, can penetrate the meat to begin the seasoning process before we put on the sugar and the acid from the overnight buttermilk brine that we have. Just a light dusting of salt is enough. We're going to let it sit for about 30 minutes to let the salt get absorbed. We're going to put it in a 2.5 gallon bag and then let it sit with the buttermilk overnight and cook it the next day. After a 30-minute rest in the refrigerator with the salt coating on the brisket, we're ready now to begin the brining process. We need the first phase to ensure that there is enough salt in the brisket. So I'm going to put 4 tablespoons of salt, just regular table salt, into 2 quarts of buttermilk. Give it a stir. This level of saltiness is good for an overnight buttermilk brine on the brisket. I'm going to roll our brisket and get it into the brine. And we're going to let this pouch sit overnight in the refrigerator. I like to keep it on a pan so in case we have a leakage or something, you're not going to kind of cause a huge mess in your refrigerator. After an overnight soak, it's time to put some rub on the brisket here. And you just drain it from the bag so that you don't have so much buttermilk in it. So just get a nice medium layer of rub on it. We can do a little lower temperature today. We'll do 225 degrees. Let it get a nice crust. Then give it a wrap. Brisket until it's throat tender. You always ask me, do you need to season the fat cap? You don't need to, I don't, but you can if you want to. By all means. It's your brisket. Just cook it the way you like. As I always tell you guys, love what you cook and cook what you love. Put the blocks of wood so that it will drain nicely as you place the brisket in. So after about 8 hours in the pit, I wrapped it in foil and then continued the rest of the cooking process in the oven. Very similar to the way you've seen in my 50 other how to cook brisket videos. We cooked it about 11.5 hours until it was probe tender. We're ready to go ahead and slice our buttermilk brine brisket now. I'm gonna go slice the flat and the point muscles separately. So here's the beautiful point muscle. I'm gonna cut it into cubes, half of it, and I'm gonna cut it into slices, the other half, to show you kind of how the variation looks. You want to cut it into slices. You want to cut it against the grain. Right now the grain's running this way, so we can do slices this way. Now we're ready for the final tasting test here. You can see from the slice that it looks pretty good. Let me show you a slice here. The slice looks like a little bit more fat cap than I would normally have. So, or 1/8 of an inch. Taste test now. Super moist, delicious. So that was the flat appearance and bark, very, very good. Let me try the point muscle here, or the burn end. Here's a nice burn end. Pretty soft and tender. Take a bite. Very good burn end. Moist, tender, juicy. Let me try a burn end slice now. So this is the same moist or fatty muscle, but just sliced. You can see here, it's pretty good. Beans, there's nothing quite like some good brisket. For my viewer who asked me about the buttermilk brine brisket, I've shown you kind of how I like to do a buttermilk brine. The buttermilk is typically used more for pork and chicken. Not so common with brisket. So the $50 question you probably want to ask is a butter brine brisket a lot better than, say, a traditional SPG or SP salt and pepper brisket, or even something that I do like a competition style brisket? You see many of my videos already where I inject it and put a competition drop. The answer is I don't know if it's worth the trouble to buttermilk brine your brisket, because it just takes a lot more effort. You gotta go buy 2 quarts of buttermilk. Can I get a same result or equivalent result by using just good technique with either a marinade, a injection, or a competition drop? The answer is they're comparable. This is just a little bit more work and not a lot of payback. So is it much better? The answer, I don't think so. It is a really good brisket, don't get me wrong. But the good brisket comes from primarily good cooking technique, good fire management, good method for controlling smoke in the pit, controlling the collagen, reduction of the Maillard reaction, and then converting the collagen to gelatin. So those techniques that I've been teaching you in my 50+ brisket videos are much more important. The buttermilk brine, you can do it if you want to. Is it a game changer? My opinion is no. Again, this is just based on one sample. I have cooked buttermilk brine brisket before as I was preparing different recipes for competition. In those other tests that I have done, anecdotally, I can tell you that it wasn't really worth the trouble. Using the phosphates in the injection is a much better technique that I think will result in a highest possible quality brisket. I won first place KCBS USA Brisket Team of the Year. So I know what a good brisket should taste like. And this is definitely, if you follow my techniques, will take you to the black belt level. And the buttermilk is something optional you can try if you want. So I hope I answered my viewer question on buttermilk brine briskets. All right, we have a care pack for Mr. Beans here with a little bit of a point in the flat. Let's see which one he likes better. Buttermilk brine brisket for Mr. Beans, the brisket judge here. Ready to go, Beans? All right. All right, he's wolfing down the point muscle. Now moving on to the flat, the fat cap, chowing it down. What do you think, Beans? You like a buttermilk brine brisket? Right? Good job. Mr. Beans enjoyed his brisket. Thanks everybody for stopping by again. And if you have any questions about my butter brine brisket, please let me know in the comments below. I will answer your question. Thanks again to all my Patreons for supporting my channel, keeping the lights on so I can offer free content on YouTube.